So I just realized that I was a bit fast this morning, maybe because typically I only have 10 more slides to show you within these 3 lectures as I thought to be. I can go further, of course, but I think it's better to take time, and I will go back for 2 steps, 2 points that many people of you asked me, and I think that could be a good idea to clarify these things. So we just finished the lectures on the thermally activated mechanism. So I had a lot of questions regarding CLIME and diffusion theory and so on. And people say, okay, so because you told us that there is no pressure component, hydrostatic pressure on the screw part of the dislocation, does this mean that there is no climb and no diffusion also toward those dislocation lines? And I would say, now that we have introduced the stacking fault, now that you all know that dislocations are not perfect dislocation lines, but they are all dissociated in partials, at least for FCC, then nobody will be a screw dislocation line anymore. So you won't have a pure screw along your line. Every time your dislocation loop will be emitted, there will be 2 partials everywhere. And the partials are not parallel. You see they have 2 Burgers vectors like that for the 2 lines, 2 Burgers vectors. So there is no way, no place where you have a pure screw dislocation. You can have a pure partial screw, but nearby you will have a mixed 60 degrees partial. So you never have a screw anywhere. And to illustrate that, I wanted to show you the first movies from Pneumodis, so the code you will use. So each of the movies here, you will make it next week. And the top left movies is exactly that. This is the Frank Reed source. You see the Frank Reed source with partials. So here you have the 2 partials, and the blue area is the stacking fault area. Okay? So you can see that initially, the arrows are the Burgers vectors. So you see that initially the 2 Burgers are like this. So this plus this, it means that it was a screw dislocation. It was a pure screw dislocation. You can see that it is indeed elongated along the screw directions globally, but locally, each partial elongates toward their own screw directions. You see? I mean, each partial has its own Burgers vector. So this is the Burgers vector for the tail partial, and this one wants to align that direction. This one wants to align this direction because it's at this 60 degrees. So this is different from what you can see in textbook. You don't have a continuous same size dissociation length everywhere. You have some region where the dissociation length is small, is short. This is typically what happens here. This is very short here at that place, and very big here at that place. Just because each of the line wants to get aligned with their own Burgers vector. You see what I mean? And so this is the first answer. And the second answer, here you can see clearly that there is no pure screw. And then you will have diffusion of atoms everywhere, actually. So diffusion, actually, to answer your question, I would say, you should ask maybe expert of the fields, but I would say that diffusion theoretically could happen everywhere as soon as your dislocation is dissociated. Because you will have edge components everywhere, actually. Okay? You see my point? So this was just to illustrate that on the top left. Okay, so you clearly see the two things. First, this elongation, and this non-continuous thickness of the stacking fault. And tomorrow you will play with that. So this is a junction. This is typically a junction. So we put together 2 dislocation arms. One was pinned between that point and the top left point, like this. The second one was here. And we don't put any stress. We just let them react as they want naturally to do. So this is just a local reaction due to the internal stresses. And because of internal stresses, the dislocation may attract, not always, but in some cases they may attract, and then recombine. The summation of the Burgers vectors gives you a new Burgers vector here, that if this is favorable, will elongate and create a big junction. And tomorrow we'll make an exercise on that to look how this junction could be formed and if this is a sessile or glissile or whatever. Okay? So that's another exercise. And the last one here is a stacking fault tetrahedra. Maybe I will come back to that in my next slides. Any question now regarding the climb mechanism and the dissociation? Is it clear now in your mind? Okay. Do you agree, Professor Sundaraman? I think that the climb, the diffusion typically could occur at any part of your line as soon as it is dissociated. There is no more pure screw component. This is no more existing. Yeah. So I think it will be everywhere. Actually. Okay. So this may answer some question I had during the break. Okay. So this slide is not in the PDF I gave you because I just added now, but you will anyway have it later on. So my last part I wanted to speak today is regarding how dislocations are introduced in the materials, because here we spoke about how they can multiply, they can move, but of course you need to have dislocation. So what happens if you don't have dislocation? How do they appear? So first thing to make them appear could be from irradiation. If you irradiate your materials a lot, you introduce a lot of interstitials, a lot by cascade, interstitial atoms will be introduced. Typically, this is the case of iron. And you can see that here, this is typical, I'm sure Professor Sundararaman will recognize what we call a coffee beam shape. So it means that this is a faulted loop. This loop is faulted, it's not a perfect loop. And he will explain us, I think, later on what does it mean in terms of TEM observation. So here you have small loops. You can see the size is very small, which were obtained with such irradiation power, 1.5 mega electrovolt, at this displacement per atom dose. This was done by my colleague Christer Robertson from Saclay. And you can see that now if you look in the material, you have another view of this. Here you can see the loops, they are very tiny. Some of them are so small you cannot identify with TEM. It's very hard, you see. This one is very, very tiny. Some over here are bigger, another bigger here, another very small here. Those loops are very small. Anyway, they are more or less than 20 nanometers in size, so they are very small. And those are Frank loops. That could be either interstitials, mainly in steels. They are made of interstitials. So interstitial, I will show you what it means. And in some other materials, like in copper, it's more like vacancies. And this is not clear today why in some cases you have more vacancies and over you have more interstitial loops. Because theoretically you should have both, right? Since you did a cascade, you should have interstitial somewhere and you should have a vacancy somewhere else. And the total amount should be more or less constant, with the flux, of course. But in some cases, when they merge, when they create the loop, when they aggregate, there are more vacancies or interstitial, and it's not the same for all the materials. There are some papers which deal with that, but it's not clear today, to my opinion. Now, this is another example of irradiation. So this was done now in copper, I think, aluminum and nickel. You have all the samples here. And again, you have this nice coffee beam that will be explained in the next lecture. So I think it's a good introduction to the next lecture, or maybe tomorrow lecture. Yeah, tomorrow, I'm sorry. You will show that tomorrow. So tomorrow, Professor Sundararaman will explain us why in such materials you have these strips like that. In the case of faulted loops, in TM it appears like strips like that. Or coffee beam for the top one. So you can see that those are the loops which are being created in those materials just by introduction of this was irradiated by ions, so it was krypton ions which were smashed toward the materials, and by cascade it created that defects. So it's not active material, it's just resulting by cascade. So what are those loops? So those loops looks like this. Again, if you take your ABC stacking, you can make two kind of Frank loops. A Frank loop is a special loop for which the Burgers vector is A delta. So the Burgers vector is perpendicular to the one plane of your Thomson tetrahedra. So this is the Burgers vectors, and you can create a loop here. For example, you remove these atoms, and you create a loop with these Burgers vectors, and then you will have a ABC, so AB, and the C is removed, ABC. So this is a vacancy loop. And it means that it has a hole. You see the atoms are missing there. It's a vacancy loop. And if you look, it creates a ABC. C is missing, so C is becoming A. So it's like a single stacking fault. The same thing as we saw before. So this here, a vacancy loop, is exactly equivalent to a single stacking fault. So what we call an intrinsic stacking fault, the same as the one which we could get, as I showed you before, by dissociation in partials. So it's like a Shockley partials. Now, if this is interstitial, so you do the same, but now you put extra atoms. So AB, after B, you have to put a, which is inserted between C, like this. And then now, if you look at that, you have AB, A, C, so you have double fault. You have AB, A, so here C is missing, and here B is missing. So you have two faults, okay? And these two faults is more energetic, of course, and this is called an extrinsic fault, a double fault. So those are the two possibilities you can see in irradiated materials, either extrinsic or intrinsic stacking fault, depending if it's vacancy or interstitial, okay? Now those loops they move with time because of the diffusion mechanism, since they are surrounding atoms or vacancies. If those atoms or vacancies are moving, are diffusing in your materials, then the size of the loop will change. So typically, this is what you can see in these snapshots here. You have 0 minutes, 6 minutes, 18 and 30 minutes in the same material. So this was done by this guy a long time ago. And this was, which material? I don't remember which was this one. This was maybe aluminum. I don't remember which one was this. Anyway, what you can see that the size of the loop now here is different. So you have the size is decreasing with time. And if you plot the radius of the loops versus the time, you can see the decreasing shape of the curve. So this gives you the diffusion rate, so the velocity at which the vacancies are emitted out of the loop, assuming that this is a vacancy loops. And you can see that the radius of the loops is decreasing. And from that, you can compute the velocity at which the radius change, like that. And then you can have a characteristic time here, which depends on your energy of your system, activation energy of your vacancy diffusion. Okay? So this is the small loop. The small loop decrease. So what happens? It means that when they decrease like that, they emit the vacancy. Vacancies are expulsed. They go out. So where are they going? They are going toward the bigger loops. So the bigger loops are increasing. So the small loops are decreasing and the bigger ones are increasing. So there is a balance of flux between the big and the small. And you have the small which disappears and the big which are bigger and bigger. It's like the rich and the poor in the world, you know. The richer are richer and richer and the poor are poorer and poorer. It's the same balance, I think. Okay? And typically this is what we did with the DD simulation here. Here we have put random loops, 64 loops with different sizes, small and big one. We put the law I showed you before, this climb law, where you have the dislocation that could move out of plane with a velocity, depending on the concentration. And this is what you find. You see that the small loops are disappearing, and the bigger loops are increasing. Then at some stage, some loops may increase and then collapse. You may have both stages for a given loop. You can see that some of them are increasing and then decreasing. Because you are always smaller than another one which is bigger than you, actually. So there will be always somebody bigger than you. Excuse me? It's just because of the diffusion rule, yes. Diffusion and climb. This is a dislocation dynamics code, so we have the climb in the code, plus diffusion, yes. Yeah. You see, and then the bigger loops are bigger and bigger, the smaller are collapsing with time like this. Yes? Exactly. There is indeed a critical size for which the loop will not, this is what we can plot here. Here you have the radius on the left, and you can see that there is a critical size here, at which here it will still collapse, and here it will still increase. So this is typically my critical size, critical radius, above which it's always stable and always increasing. Okay? So for out of the simulation, we can compute the concentration of the solution on the loops. And we also have the distribution of the loop radius. So this is all the radius of the different loops, number of loops for a given radius in the box at different time of your simulation. The time is very long, right? It is diffusion. So diffusion is a very slow process. It takes seconds, hours to diffuse. It's not like a glide. Dislocation glide is very fast. It takes a microsecond for dislocation can fly at several thousands of meters per second maximum. So it's very fast. But climbing is very slow. It's a very, very slow process. So the time here is very big. So here it was a pure climb simulation. There was no glide allowed in the simulation. So here you have the loop distribution, and you can see that at the end, so the end is the smallest here, peak, you have bigger loops. So the peak is more on the right. It has been shifted on the right. And the number of loops also decreased much like that. So you have less and less loops, and they are bigger and bigger in size. Okay? So, yes?
In the radius versus time, so there is some which just shrink, right?
Yes. The smallest?
There are some increase and then decrease.
Yes.
So why is that?
It's just because actually first they absorbed some neighbor dislocation, not dislocation, but loops that were very close. So they absorbed those loops, and then they were like that. And then the bigger loops came in vicinity and took it. You see? It's just a balance between the...
You don't have the concentration of wickets
In that case, it was fixed, yes. Yes, in that case, it was fixed. Yeah. Recently, we did something heterogeneous, but it was not at that stage here. Yeah. This was fixed here. Excuse me? But this was in the... it will change the velocity in my computing. It will change the velocity at which we will have it. So the time scale will be very much depending on temperature. Because remember that my climb velocity law, there was a temperature explicitly in the law. And this will speed up a lot if you increase the temperature, the process. That's a good point. This, I would say so, but I'm not sure because this, in our case, I would say so, yes. Because
If you don't scale your vacancy concentration with temperature, then this
no, but there is the Arrhenius law, anyway. There is the Arrhenius law in the velocity, where the temperature is explicitly there. Yes, that's the. If you think of only about that, I think it will just shift that. Except that, what is not true is that if you change the temperature, the climb force will not be changed. So the balance is not equivalent. You see, you have two components for the climb. There is a force, so the pitch color force, which is taking out your dislocation of the plane, and there is a diffusional force. The diffusion force is depending a lot of temperature, but not the climb force. So if you increase the temperature, you will just move one of the two terms. So I'm not sure it will only shift the axis, it will make big differences. Yes? Yeah. It will be pushed, yes, yes, sure. It will grow or yes, sure. Yeah. Yes, sure. Yeah. But now if you want to do that more precisely, here this was a rough simulation, I would say. It was very simple one where we have an infinite concentration of a solution which was a fixed constant. In the new simulation we performed, and maybe I will show you in the next lectures, what we did is that we divided the box into small boxes, and in each boxes we compute the concentration of vacancies. So it was an heterogeneous concentration of vacancies. And then we compute the Fick equations. So we solve the diffusion equation to have the real concentration everywhere when dislocation were moving and diffusion occurred. That's a more complex phenomena to take into account, and this now is possible. But here it was not. Here it was a homogeneous concentration in the box. So it's a bit artificial. You have the flux, so you have to compute the gradient, yes, sure. And yes, it's all about the gradient, yeah. So now these loops that you have introduced by irradiation, they can transform into pure dislocation, perfect dislocations. So you have several possibilities. The first one here is a Frank loop here, that was made of interstitial, so it's an interstitial Frank loop. So this was done by Jaime Marian in USA. Typically, and it's similar to the one I showed you before with Pneumodis, where you have this loop here, the shape of the loop, surrounding interstitial, and you can see that the loop will now split into partials, as explained here, and those partials can glide in their one-on-one plane, leading to a tetrahedra, and this is typically what is seen in copper. In copper, like that, you have a lot of tetrahedra. You don't see clearly, but those shapes are typical of the tetrahedra. Stacking fold tetrahedra is called this thing, which is coming out from the Frank loop. So initially you had a loop, and then just by unfolding the loop in the one-on-one plane, and you can see that you form a tetrahedra which is totally made of partial. Actually, it's a stair rod. So what is a stair rod, by the way? If you look at your tetrahedra, what is a stair rod? You have the name on the screen. Can you find in your tetrahedra where are located the stair rod? You see, stair rod is typically beta gamma, delta beta, gamma delta. What is it in your tetrahedra? You see what it is, a stair rod? It is the vector, the Burger's vectors, which is connecting 2 points of the two middle faces of your tetrahedra. It's not a partial which is in the plane. It's not in the plane. It's out of the plane like that. So this is the stair rod segment, okay? So this stair rod is the borderline of the tetrahedra. It's made of those stair rods like this, okay? And at the end, it's a totally faulted tetrahedra, so it's a stacking fault tetrahedra. Now, another way to introduce dislocation in your material is not to use irradiation, but stress concentrators. So typically, if you push on your material, or you scratch your surface, you will introduce defects. You will introduce dislocations. So this is typically what happened here. This was a scratch done by my colleague Christian Robertson by mistake. Actually, he wanted to perform a nano indentation, and when he moved, the indenter scratches a bit the surface. So it was like a low penetration nano indentation, and you can see many dislocations already, not one or two dislocations, but thousands of them, and specific ones which are there, which are prismatic loops. Those are what we call prismatic loops. You see, these loops, and I think we will make since I have time, I think I will explain what is a prismatic loop, because this is an animal I love. I love those prismatic loops, so I want you to love also these prismatic loops. They are something very important in plasticity. So these prismatic loops, we can also observe them in molecular dynamics simulations. This is an MD simulation. I will show you that also in a few days. You see, I did the same test as experimentally. So I push a big sphere was applied on the top of a set of atoms. The atoms are not represented here if they are perfect. If they have been moved, then we plot the atoms. And the coloring is just the number of neighbors which are in the correct or not correct position. So you can see that when we press on the surface, something appears inside the material. Here, you will see. Puff, here, you see, it was nucleated inside the material, so not at the surface, but inside, where the shear stress is maximum, typically, 0.47 times the contact radius, according to Hertz theory, typically. And then, quickly, these things react and touch the surface with something which is complex, a complex microstructure. Here, I want you to see two things. First, the orange things here are the stacking fault. In MD, you have stacking fault naturally. You always have it. The red lines are the tail and the head and the tail partials for the partials. Here you can see the partials, you see? So this is just a perfect dislocation, dissociated in two partials, but simulated by molecular dynamics, okay? So very quickly, you have this complex mechanism, and this structure touches the surface, and it looks like a triangle at the surface. So if you look at the first defect, it was like that. I looked seriously in the MD simulations. This was the first defect. It was made of three planes. This is a three planes things, like that, with several stacking faults inside, like that. Here you have an orange plane, a green plane, orange plane, and a green and orange again. So it means that in my stacking fault, it was like that. A, B, C, A, C, B, A, you see? So it means that it was like a triple Shockley. It was like if I had three stacking faults in my sequence. So this is what we call a triple Shockley partials, and this is typically a small twin. If I was going further, you see, here you have BC, AC. This is a symmetric. You see, ACB, ACB. Here you have a symmetry plane. You see this symmetry plane, and this is the beginning of a twin. We didn't speak about twin because these lectures are about dislocations. But maybe we will see twins. I don't know if you will show twins on your slides, maybe. But so the twin is just when your network is just flipped like that. So you have ABC, for example, ABC, which is now reversed ACB. So you have a mirror symmetry of your stacking, okay? So here, locally, you had this mirror symmetry. So this is a twin, a small twin, which was nucleated at that position. But this twin was not something very much important for the material. If you go further, but later on, you see what, if I go on the movie, I go on loading the sample, do you see what happens? You have a strange thing here which appears, another here, and the third one here. Those two do not expand just because of periodic symmetry, because this one will go back here. So because of symmetry, those two interact, and this impedes the dislocation to propagate. But if I take a bigger box, this will be, now that I took a bigger box, so all those simulations were run on my laptop 10 years ago. So I'm sure you can do it very easily on a single laptop. Now, there is less than 1.5 million atoms here. So it's something that takes a couple of hours nowadays to run. So this is the same simulations, but now I took a bigger box. You could see that 3 loops come out from that. You can see a first loop which is coming here, a second one here, and the third one on the back. Those two were the two which were interacting before. Okay? So those are called prismatic loops. So you see that it's not a loop as we are used to. Usually the loops were supposed to expand. Here they do not expand, they glide. What are these loops? Do you have any idea of what kind of loops is this? Prismatic loops, did you hear about prismatic loops before? Yeah? Yes? Exactly. The Berger vector is perpendicular to the habit plane of the loop. So this I can make a small plot, if you want. Because we will, I think it's good to speak about that here, because we will meet these loops many times. In line notation, we have it here. And in fatigue also, tomorrow or the day after, I will speak about fatigue. These loops play a big role. So what are those loops? Those loops actually are made like that. Those loops are just, you find a Berger's vector, you can define your Berger's vector like this, okay? You can define a plane. This is a slip plane containing your Berger's vector. And in that plane, you can define an edge dislocation. This is my edge dislocation, okay? This is my edge dislocation. Then you know that this edge dislocation, in your Thomson tetrahedra here, this is my Berger's vector, this is my edge dislocation. I can have another edge dislocation which share the same Berger's vector, which has an angle which is not 90 degrees, there is an acute angle. So here I can define another plane, like that, which also shares the same Berger's vector. So here I can put another edge dislocation here. And then I can close this loop by another plane, like this, and the fourth plane here. So the loop, the final loop, will be like this. Oops. Do you see the loop? So the loop is made of what kind of segment? What is this segment? Is it an edge or is it the screw? This is an edge segment, okay? Indeed, this is an edge segment because it is perpendicular to the Berger's vector, and it is in this plane here, okay? Like that. And if I was to plot the Thomson tetrahedra, I could locate the Thomson tetrahedra here in that corner here. The Thomson tetrahedra is like that, okay? You have your Thomson tetrahedra, which sits beneath this plane. Well, I don't want to plot it. So this loop are what we can see here. So this is the loop. So they can glide, actually, they can glide in the cylinder. The edge segments can move on this direction. Each segment can move on their own plane. So they can glide like this, okay? But it's not so easy to glide, actually. Why is it not so easy? Because, of course, this loop has a sign. As any loop, any dislocation, there is an orientation for the line. So you can give an orientation, like this, for example. Let's say this is my line orientation. Now, this is a question time, because this is the end of my lecture. So what is this loop? Is it interstitial or vacancy? I told you that because of my rules, which is T or U, B, N, which is direct, you should be able to identify if this is vacancy or interstitial loop, this red loop here. Just tell me if this is interstitial or vacancy loop. This is U, this is B, where is N? If you had to plot, you see, if you had to plot this symbol or this symbol on this segment, which one would you pick up? Where is the extra half plane? On that side or that side for this guy, typically? So you say, yes, I think it's correct because this is U, B, N. So the N is outside. If I look here, U, B, N, N is outside. If I look here, U, B, N, outside. U, B, N, outside. So the fourth side, the extra half plane is outside. So this is my extra half plane. This is my extra half plane. And this is my extra half plane. Okay? So this is a vacancy loop. Just because I put this orientation. Now if I was doing the opposite one, so if I put the same here, but negative, if I put the opposite sign dislocation loop, this one is interstitial because U, B, N is inside. So this is my extra half plane. U, B, N is inside. This is my extra half plane, and so on and so on. So this is interstitial. prismatic loop. Okay, and this is vacancy. Is it clear for everybody, or do you have some doubt on that? Yeah? So I said that this dislocation is not so naturally gliding on their cylinder. Why? Because if I apply now a shear, just assume I'm applying a shear, and this will be the first exercise I will ask you to do with Numodis next week. You will put a prismatic loop and shear it, and see how it moves. What do you think happens to the red dislocation? Just to assume that I'm pushing this like that and this like that. I'm shearing the crystal that way. What happens? This one has the head here, so this one wants to move up or down if I shear that way. This one wants to move up. Okay, I will put. So it means that the shape, this line will move up. Let's say like this, okay? It will go upstairs. But this one is negative. So this one will move down. Exactly. So finally, the loop will get inclined. The loop will not glide, it will get inclined. One will go up, one will go down, and it will be immobile. So here it's not immobile, it is gliding. So why is it so? It's different. Something is different here. Why is it gliding and not inclined? Do you have any idea how this could happen? It's just because here it's positive stress and here is negative stress. Just because of the loading due to the spherical indentation. Here at one side it will be positive, the opposite side is negative. So the full dislocation move from the load, like this. Okay? You get it? Just, I mean that here, if here I have this stress here is tau positive, and if here I put tau negative, then they will all move. So it means that there is a change of sign in the stress, in the shear stress. The shear stress in your slip systems is positive and negative, and they change on each part of the loop. There is a change of sign in the shear stress in that typical situation. Okay? That's the first thing. And the last thing I wanted to tell you, so that I think you will be ready for the next lectures, is why was this evident? It was obvious that we should have such features. It's because if you look at, let's do it in 2D. In 2D, I think it's even clearer. In 2D, you have your atoms like this. This is your stack of atoms. Okay? And if you push, let's say, with a flat punch, even if it's not an inertor, it's a flat punch, then you push these atoms inside your material. So finally, they are there. Okay? If you, by succession, sometimes it will be here. So here my atoms are there. And my atoms which are here, they are missing on the top. So on the top, here there is a hole. There is a hole here, like that. So here there is some atoms which are missing, and here atoms are extra. Okay? And this hole is exactly equivalent to the vacancy loop. It means that some atoms are missing in the vacancy loop. So this loops creates a punch at the surface. Every time you have a prismatic loops, at the surface there is a punch or an extrusion. Extrusion if it's interstitial, punch if it's in vacancy. You see? So those loops accommodate exactly extrusion and intrusion. This is why you can find them very frequently in fatigue. Fatigue, you have this extrusion, intrusion things, and you have them every time in nano indentation. These loops, okay? So here you have this is the equivalent to the interstitial vacancy loop, like that. Let's say that you have your plane which is missing, and here you have your interstitial loop. And they have to be on the exact same cylinder. They have to be exactly on the same cylinder in order to keep the volume constant. Since you want to be conservative, if this is missing here, it has to be there. So they should be aligned in the same cylinder. So in my nano indentation here, I'm sure that here you have a vacancy loop, an interstitial loop. So this is an interstitial loop for sure. And at the surface, I have the punch. The corresponding punch is at the surface. So at the surface, I have the vacancy, and in the material, I have the interstitial. Okay? Here I want to question, because I'm here, it's not so easy to understand. Yes?
The shape of the loop should depend upon the shape of the face that is made.
No, not exactly. here you see the shape of the loop is exactly accommodating your Thomson tetrahedra. It's exactly this, because you have the two burgers vector here, you have no choice, and you have this angle here, which is 55.7 degrees, something like that, which is the two angles between one-on-one planes. Okay? So if you take these two, this corresponds to the acute part of this, and the obtuse here is just when you close it, the opposite side with the two. So here you have an acute angle. So you have acute and obtuse angle. So it's not a square loop. And you cannot do it round or whatever. If it was round, then the loop is not perfect loop. It will not be in one-on-one plane, so you have some non-conservative motion. So if you want to have only conservative motion, you need to have this shape. Okay. Yes, indeed, it could be. Yes, sure, definitely. Yeah, it could be hexagonal. Yeah. Yeah. I never did it in BCC. This is something I'd like to do. I don't have time. This is something I do by myself when I have some free time, and I have less and less free time, so it doesn't go fast. But this is something that could be interesting to do in BCC. Yes, sure. Yeah. Okay, for the prismatic loops. So prismatic loops are these things. So you have vacancy and interstitial always at the same place, accommodating some punch or extrusion. So if these guys, let's go further, if these guys reach the bottom surface, then you will have a burst here, which corresponds to the extrusion. Okay? These guys living here. And in fatigue, this happens. You have some prismatic loops which reach the surface, and this creates some extrusion. Okay? So this is what you see here. So you see two things. You see that, excuse me? Yeah. This is what I explained. So maybe this is not, I was not clear. Actually, if the stress was homogeneous, they would not glide, they would just get inclined. Okay? Because the change of sign between here and here, this go up, this go down. But here it's not the case, just because the stress field due to the nano indentation, the stress field here, typically, I would say here, if I plot the shear stress, here the shear stress will be positive, and here the shear stress will be negative. So both will move the same way then. Just because of the sign of the shear stress locally, due to the applied loading. Because of that, it moves. That's the reason why. But you will do it with the code next week. You will put a prismatic loops, apply the pure homogeneous stress, and you will see that it gets inclined. Okay? Is it clear? Okay? So this was the nano indentation for the stress concentrator. I think you have other source of concentration that may exist in your material. Typically the case where you have particles. This was the case of yttrium particles in magnesium alloy. So this is very hard particles. And also how do you call it? Dilatation coefficient? Does it work? Dilatation coefficient, you said that? How do you say when? Not dilatation. Yes. Dilatation coefficient is not the same between the magnesium and the yttrium. Just because of that, when you have some heat treatment on the material, you may have some stress concentration at the interface. And this creates dislocation. You can see clearly those dislocation located at the particle. And because of this stress, this dislocation will be nucleated there and may accommodate plasticity. And in textbook, I didn't have time to take the picture of this. You can find a very nice spherical particle like this that was quenched inside the aluminium matrix, I think, something like this. And from the particles, you can see a lot of prismatic loops which were emitted, just to accommodate the change of volume between the matrix and the particle. So many prismatic loops, the same as this, were emitted out from the spherical particle. If I have time, I will take you the picture tomorrow. Okay? So that's another source of concentration. And another one here, what was my conclusion for this lecture is that the nucleation process is not a key mechanism in plasticity. You always have enough dislocation usually to accommodate plasticity. So the key process will not be nucleation, it will rather be multiplication. It's very easy to multiply dislocations, to make thousands of dislocations out of a single arm, rather than nucleate a new one, which costs a lot of energy. And here I will show you some TM in situ to illustrate that. You can see how one single dislocation source can emit so many lines and loops, so that they can pile up. Here typically you have pile-ups also. You can see that dislocation pile-ups, so that they can move further. Like we call it a train of dislocations. So you have a huge amount of dislocation multiplied here. And here another examples in molybdenum with a few percent of niobium. You can see how the loops are fast and moving fast in the material. So here you don't need to nucleate anything, you have enough. You have enough. So as soon as you have the dislocation of the slip system you want, they will multiply and accommodate what you need. They will do it for you, for sure. So you don't need to introduce new dislocation, whatever. They will always find a path to accommodate what you want. Okay? And if they are not in the right slip system, they will cross-slip and they do what they need to do in order to accommodate your loading. Okay? So this was more or less my conclusion for this, this third lecture. And I said that now, if you want more real dislocations, Professor Sundararaman, I think, will be happy to show you some of them. Okay? So thank you very much for these first 3 hours lectures. And now I can answer to your question, of course, if you have any regarding this. Yeah, this was the website from, I found it yesterday. But we can recognize. So any question? Yes? For the climb, you mean? For climb? Yes. Yes, sure. Oh, yes. This for sure. I told you that if the shape is not like that, it means that you have diffusion. So it's exactly what you said. And typically, it's something I didn't, something which is missing in my lecture. There is a source of diffusion which is called a Bardeen-Ehring source. It's exactly the same as the Frank-Reed source, but on diffusion only. So you only have, it's a growing of this prismatic loop. So you can assume that you start with this, and then you round the corner, and then you make something spherical, and then it expands just by diffusion. But you need for that to be non-conservative here. You need to glide out of the planes to do that. So you need diffusion for sure. And then this grow like a Frank-Reed source, but very slowly. It's what we call Bardeen-Ehring source. You can make Bardeen-Ehring here. You can see this source growing like that, just because of diffusion. Yes. Yeah, this I didn't show you today. Good question, yes. I don't feel, the teachers are speaking. They are what? Constant? Yes. They are glide loops, yes, they are all glissile, because they can, yes, I will call it prismatic loop, because they have the specificity that the Burgers vector is perpendicular to the habit plane. But if you look at this segment only, if you forget about the remaining part, it's just a normal edge segment, so it's a glissile loop. And it is so glissile that then if you load very seriously your sample, you see your loop is like this. So let's say that you have a loop which is shear. And you will do that with NuModis. If you apply a big shear on that system, and mostly zero shear on that system, then you will be able to bow out a lot this segment, and so a lot that it can act like a Frank-Reed source. So you may have Frank-Reed source in some part of the loop, which will make a huge plasticity, and that will accommodate anything you want, you see. So this is typically what happens in nano indentation. Initially, you have these prismatic loops, but very quickly they change into a Frank-Reed source. This point here just need to remain on that line. That's the only thing. But it can move up and down, and this can rotate around that point. You see? So it's, for me, it's glissile loops, but initially they are called prismatic just because they are in a plane which is perpendicular to the Burgers vector. But finally, when you will have something very complicated like this, and just imagine this one goes up like this, the next one goes up also like this, and this one goes down like this. If you look at that in 3D, you do not recognize it's a prismatic loop. It's impossible. I'm sure Professor Sundararaman will not say it's a prismatic loop. It looks like a glissile loop, but it's a 3D structure, and if you rotate exactly along the Burgers vector, you will see that it is a prismatic loop. But if you look like that, it will be like a distorted loop. We will play with that with NuModis. We'll do that. Okay? Yes? Yes, sure. We saw that in the MD simulations, it is dissociated, you see. Let's say the next one is better. You will see the two partials. So the prismatic loop is split in two partials. You see? This is a side of prismatic loop, it's split in two partials. You see? Yeah. And the specificity, this we can do also with NuModis, because we have the partials in NuModis. You will see that it's not, maybe the next movie was better. You see that it's not symmetric. There is one corner which is pinned like that, and one which is elongated. So you have a constriction at one side, and the other one is not constricted. So you have a stair rod on one side and a constriction at the other side. And this is just due to the line energy, because NuModis can reproduce that exactly. So actually, the dislocation so I don't know if we will have time to do it in NuModis, but we can try. So the dislocation is like this. It's extended here, and then extended here, and pinned there, you see. So it's not symmetric. It is symmetric, but there is some points which are pinned and some points which are elongated. I don't know why it's like this. But yes, I know why. If you look at the partial splitting and you make the path for the Burgers vector, it gives this. It's natural. You see, and then on the corner, on the next, it will be like that, on the behind. So this is how it looks, okay? So this is the loop here. Another question you have? Okay. I don't want to start now my tomorrow lecture because it's on a totally different subject. It's on hardening. So if I start now, it will be... and I think I already gave you too much information. Okay. So if not, I think we can stop here now for the third lecture. And tomorrow, I promise I will go slowly to be sure that you... and you should ask questions, actually. Yes? The indentation what? Oh, this one, yes, that's a good question. Yes, I didn't say anything. This was 111. This was the 111 plane. So yes, to illustrate this, but this is an example I will give later on, so we will see that in details. This is the 111 plane, so we are pushing on that plane. And on that plane, you have three Burgers vectors, those three, which are activated. And you built your prismatic loops out of those three Burgers vectors. This explains why you have those three loops. Okay, you push here, and you have three loops expanding among those three directions. Okay, that's exactly what. That was a good question. Thank you for asking. Any other questions? Okay, I will stop here then.